Hey guys, I made a drawstring bucket bag. You could also use it as a fabric bin, and here's what I did. First, I made a circle template for the base. The radius was 4 3/8 of an inch, and it had a circumference of about 27.5 inches. I added a 1/2 inch border around it for the seam allowance. I taped the border so that it could be easily removed when tracing my template. Then I made a rectangle template. The width was half the circumference of the circle, which was 13 3/4 of an inch. The height was 10 3/4 of an inch, and I added a 1/2 inch border around it. I also made a 13 3/4 of an inch by 3 inch strip with a 1/2 inch border around it. I used a thick black cotton fabric for the outside, a pattern fabric for the inside, and muslin cotton for the lining. I also used Heat and Bond Ultra Hold to make the bag sturdy. There's a shiny side and the other side has the paper. I drew the rectangle on the paper side and cut it out, leaving a little bit of extra paper around it. I made 2 of these. Place the shiny side over the fabric used for lining, then iron it. I placed fabric over the Heat and Bond so that the iron wasn't directly touching it. Take your time ironing and make sure that the edges stick to the fabric. Then cut out the rectangle. Do the same to the other sheet. I also made a circle piece. I drew and cut out the rectangle with a border on the outer fabric, and I made 2 of them. I also drew and cut out the circle with the border. I made halfway marks on the circle to use as a guide. Peel the paper off the Heat and Bond and iron it onto the outer fabric. Align the 2 rectangles with the backs facing out and sew along both sides of the lining. I also made a zigzag stitch along the edge so that the fabric wouldn't fray. Next, pin the circle piece to the bottom. I aligned the halfway marks of the circle with the seams of the rectangles. Then sew them together. I trimmed the border and once again sewed a zigzag stitch along the rim. Turn it inside out and set it aside. Repeat this process with the inside fabric, but leave an opening bigger than the one I made on one of the sides and leave it inside out. Next, I cut 2 strips using the outer fabric. Fold along the side marks and fold over again. Then sew it. Align the top and bottom of the strip. I marked the top and bottom's 1/2 inch border on the other side of the fabric. Align the 2 folded strips to the edge of the outer fabric. Place and pin the inside fabric over it. Then sew them together. I trimmed the border and made a zigzag stitch along the rim. Pull the fabric through the opening to turn the bag inside out. Then sew the opening closed with a ladder stitch. Tuck in the inside fabric. I ironed the top and clipped it for a few minutes to flatten the seam. I used parachute cord and I cut 2 pieces at 36 inches. With a safety pin, I pinned one end of the cord and strung it through both strips. Then I strung the other cord going in the opposite direction. I knotted the ends using an overhand knot and cut the extra cord. I melted the ends so that the cords wouldn't unravel, and your drawstring bucket bag is done.